Look at your reflection. What do you see? A good person? Someone moral? Someone who would never harm others? Now imagine that reflection changing, slowly, imperceptibly, until one day you don't recognize who's staring back. The most dangerous person in history isn't the one born evil. It's the good person who transforms, the neighbor who becomes the informant, the friend who betrays, the ordinary citizen who participates in atrocity. Look around you, the people you trust, the people you admire, even yourself. Under the right circumstances, any one of us could become something we never imagined. This isn't speculation. It's documented human behavior, proven through history and science. The question isn't whether good people can become monsters. The evidence is overwhelming that they can. The real questions are, how does this happen? Why does it happen? And most importantly, could it happen to you? Today we'll journey into the darkest corners of human psychology. We'll uncover the mechanisms that transform ordinary, decent people into perpetrators of cruelty, and we'll discover the tools that might save us from the same fate. This isn't just academic. This is about you, your family, your community, your future. In 1971, a young psychology professor named Philip Zimbardo conducted what would become one of the most infamous experiments in history. He created a mock prison in the basement of Stanford University and randomly assigned students to be either guards or prisoners. What happened next shocked the world. Within days, the guards, normal students chosen for their mental stability, became cruel and sadistic. They forced prisoners to clean toilets with bare hands, made them sleep on concrete, and subjected them to psychological torture. The experiment was scheduled to last 2 weeks. Zimbardo had to shut it down after just 6 days. What's most disturbing isn't that the guards became cruel, it's how quickly it happened. These weren't evil people. They were ordinary students who, when placed in positions of power, with social approval, and in an environment that normalized cruelty, transformed before everyone's eyes. As Zimbardo later wrote, the line between good and evil is permeable. Any of us can move across it when pressured by situational forces. But the Stanford prison experiment is just one example. History provides countless others. Consider the ordinary German citizens who participated in the Holocaust, the neighbors who reported Jews hiding nearby, the railway workers who transported millions to death camps, the bureaucrats who scheduled the trains. Hannah Arendt, observing the trial of Nazi officer Adolf Eichmann, coined the phrase "the banality of evil" to describe how ordinary people can commit extraordinary atrocities, not out of sadism or hatred, but through a process of normalization and duty. So what are the forces that drive this transformation? What turns good people into perpetrators of harm? The first is incremental change, what psychologists call the slippery slope. No one wakes up one morning and decides to become a monster. The journey begins with small compromises that seem insignificant at the time. Think about it this way. Would you steal $10,000 from your employer? Most people would say no. But what about taking home a pen from the office? That seems minor. Then maybe printing personal documents on the company printer. Then perhaps fudging an expense report by a few dollars. Each step is a small ethical compromise, but they pave the way for larger ones. As C.S. Lewis wrote, the safest road to hell is the gradual one, the gentle slope, soft underfoot without sudden turnings, without milestones, without signposts. And once you're on that road, you rarely notice how far you've traveled until it's too late. The second force is authority. Stanley Milgram's obedience experiments in the 1960s demonstrated this with chilling clarity. Participants were ordered to administer what they believed were painful electric shocks to another person. Despite hearing screams of pain, 65% of participants continued to the maximum voltage simply because an authority figure told them to. Milgram concluded, ordinary people, simply doing their jobs, and without any particular hostility on their part, can become agents in a terrible, destructive process. We like to believe we would resist immoral orders. History suggests otherwise. The third force is group identity. When we strongly identify with a group, whether religious, political, or social, our moral reasoning changes. We become willing to do things for the group that we would never do as individuals. Social psychologist Henry Tajfel showed that even arbitrary group assignments create an us versus them mentality. Once this division exists, dehumanization follows, seeing the other as less deserving of moral consideration. This explains why ordinary people participated in atrocities throughout history. They didn't see themselves as doing evil. They saw themselves as protecting their group from enemies who were less than human. The fourth force is perhaps the most insidious: self-justification. Psychologist Leon Festinger's theory of cognitive dissonance explains that when our actions contradict our beliefs about ourselves, we experience psychological discomfort. To resolve this, we don't usually change our actions, we change our beliefs. A person who thinks of themselves as kind but who has hurt someone doesn't admit to being cruel. Instead, they convince themselves the victim deserved it. This is why perpetrators of harm rarely see themselves as villains. They create narratives that preserve their self-image as good people. As Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who survived the Soviet Gulag, wrote, "To do evil, a human being must first of all believe that what he's doing is good, or else that it's a well-considered act in conformity with natural law." Look in the mirror again. What stories are you telling yourself? The fifth force is moral licensing. When people establish themselves as moral in one area, they often give themselves permission to act immorally in others. Studies show that people who first recall their good deeds are more likely to cheat or make discriminatory choices afterward. This explains why some of the cruelest acts in history were committed by people who believed they were righteous. Their perceived moral superiority became a license for harm. The sixth force is environmental influence. As Zimbardo's prison experiment showed, the situation we're in shapes our behavior more than we like to admit. Systems, cultures, and environments can bring out the worst in good people. This is why ordinary people in toxic workplaces become bullies, why kind individuals in violent neighborhoods may commit violence, and why decent people in corrupt systems engage in corruption. Now facing these forces, you might feel discouraged. If good people so easily become perpetrators of harm, what hope is there? But here's where our story takes a turn. Because understanding these forces does not just explain how good people become monsters, it also reveals how to prevent it. Throughout history, even in the darkest circumstances, some individuals have resisted. During the My Lai massacre in Vietnam, helicopter pilot Hugh Thompson landed his aircraft between American soldiers and Vietnamese civilians, ordering his crew to fire on fellow Americans if they continued killing innocent people. During the Holocaust, ordinary factory owner Oskar Schindler risked everything to save over 1,000 Jewish lives. In Rwanda, Paul Rusesabagina sheltered over 1,000 refugees during the genocide. What makes these moral heroes different? Research by psychologist Ervin Staub suggests several key factors. First is moral awareness. Those who resist harm maintain constant vigilance over their own ethical choices. They don't assume they're immune to corruption. They actively guard against it. As philosopher Iris Murdoch wrote, "The most essential and fundamental aspect of culture is the study of how to be a good person." Second is empathy. Studies show that maintaining emotional connection to potential victims makes harmful actions much more difficult. When we truly see others' humanity, dehumanization becomes nearly impossible. This explains why propaganda preceding genocide always portrays victims as less than human. It's why military training often involves dehumanizing the enemy. Breaking the empathic connection is necessary for good people to harm others. Third is moral courage, the willingness to stand against the group, question authority, and accept personal risk to do what's right. Psychologist Philip Zimbardo, after spending years studying how good people turn evil, now researches what he calls everyday heroes, ordinary people who take extraordinary moral action. He found that moral courage isn't an innate trait, but a skill that can be developed through practice. Each time we take a small stand for what's right, we build our capacity for larger acts of courage. Fourth is critical thinking. Those who resist harmful influences maintain independent judgment. They question orders, evaluate group norms, and examine their own justifications. As philosopher Hannah Arendt observed about those who resisted Nazi influence, the deciding difference was that they asked themselves to what extent they would still be able to live in peace with themselves after having committed certain deeds. Fifth is connection to core values. Research shows that people who regularly reflect on their deepest values are more likely to act consistently with them, even under pressure. They have an internal compass that guides them when external forces push toward harm. Viktor Frankl, who survived Nazi concentration camps, wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." The final protective factor is perhaps the most powerful: community. While toxic groups can corrupt good people, supportive moral communities can sustain goodness, even in darkness. During genocides, those most likely to rescue victims were people embedded in social networks where helping was expected and valued. Their communities provided both moral support and practical assistance for resistance. So where does this leave us? With both a warning and a hope. The warning is that none of us is immune to these forces. The psychological mechanisms that transform good people into perpetrators of harm operate in all human minds. The hope is that transformation isn't inevitable. By understanding these forces, we can resist them. By building protective factors in ourselves and our communities, we can maintain our humanity, even when pressured to abandon it. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, "The ultimate measure of a person is not where they stand in moments of comfort and convenience, but where they stand at times of challenge and controversy." So what will you do with this knowledge? Will you examine your small compromises before they become large ones? Will you question authority when it demands harm? Will you see the humanity in those your group calls enemy? Will you build communities that strengthen moral courage rather than conformity? Remember that the line between good and evil runs through every human heart, including yours. None of us is permanently on one side or the other. We cross that line or hold it through daily choices that may seem small, but accumulate to define who we become. Philosopher Simone Weil wrote, "Evil, when we are in its power, is not felt as evil, but as a necessity or even a duty." This is why good people become monsters, not because they choose evil, but because they lose the ability to see it. Your task is to keep seeing, to stay awake, to maintain moral clarity even when everything around you conspires to cloud it. The transformation of good people into perpetrators of harm is not inevitable. History shows us both the human capacity for moral collapse and for moral courage. Which story you embody depends not on your inherent goodness, but on your ongoing choices. As you leave here today, remember, the greatest protection against becoming what you fear is to face the possibility that it could happen to you. Paradoxically, those most certain of their goodness are often most vulnerable to corruption, while those who acknowledge their capacity for wrongdoing are better equipped to prevent it. In the end, the question isn't just whether you can avoid becoming a monster, it's whether you can become more fully human, more compassionate, more courageous, more conscious of your choices and their consequences. I'll leave you with the words of Václav Havel, who resisted communist oppression and later became president of Czechoslovakia. Hope is not the conviction that something will turn out well, but the certainty that something makes sense, regardless of how it turns out. The struggle to remain human in inhumane circumstances, to stay good when pressured toward evil. This makes sense. It matters. It's the most important work any of us will ever do.